Tentunya kita berharap, kami di CSIS berharap berbagai kalangan yang berkepentingan dapat memperoleh informasi yang lebih fokus dan mendalam mengenai arah kebijakan luar negeri Indonesia ke depannya. Sekali lagi saya ingin mengucapkan terima kasih kepada Bapak Prabowo Subianto atas kehadirannya bersama kami hari ini. Saya juga ingin mengucapkan selamat mendengarkan dan selamat berdiskusi bagi Bapak, Ibu, dan hadirin sekalian yang telah datang ke acara kami. Terima kasih banyak.
Kita berikan tepuk tangan yang meriah untuk Bapak Yose Rizal selaku Direktur Eksekutif CSIS Indonesia. Dan sekarang kita akan memasuki acara utama pada siang hari ini, yaitu pidato yang akan disampaikan oleh Bapak Prabowo Subianto mengenai arah dan strategi politik luar negeri. Acara inti pada hari ini akan dipimpin oleh moderator kita, yaitu Bapak Dr. Philips Vermonte selaku Senior Fellow CSIS Indonesia. Beliau saat ini juga menjabat sebagai Dekan Ilmu Sosial Universitas Islam Internasional Indonesia dan merupakan seorang cendekia ternama Indonesia yang banyak mengamati mengenai kondisi politik komparatif. Langsung saja panggung saya serahkan kepada Bapak Dr. Philips Vermonte. Kita berikan tepuk tangan yang meriah untuk acara inti kita pada siang hari ini.
Terima kasih Rani. Selamat siang Bapak Ibu semua. Sungguh merupakan kehormatan untuk menjadi moderator di acara pidato mengenai politik luar negeri yang akan disampaikan oleh Bapak Prabowo Subianto sebagai calon presiden untuk pemilu tahun 2024-2029. Tidak perlu banyak perkenalan, cuma saya hanya ingin menyampaikan bahwa Pak Prabowo tentu saja memiliki pendidikan militer yang lengkap, alumni ABRI Angkatan Darat tahun 1974, juga menempuh pendidikan Special Forces Officer Course, Fort Benning, USA, 1981, Advanced Infantry Officer, 1985. Beliau juga baru saja menerbitkan buku Kepemimpinan Militer Indonesia yang saya rasa Bapak Ibu semua sudah mendapatkannya di koridor auditorium CSIS. Acara hari ini berlangsung dalam bahasa Indonesia, tetapi as you wish, if you wish to speak in English, silakan Pak Prabowo, tetapi juga Bapak Ibu semua yang ingin menyampaikan pertanyaan dalam bahasa Indonesia atau bahasa Inggris disediakan simultaneous translation. Without further ado, 30 menit waktu Pak Prabowo untuk menyampaikan pidato dan akan dilanjutkan tanya jawab. Floor is yours, Pak.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang, saudara-saudara sekalian. Salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan. Yang saya hormati, Bapak Harichan Silalahi, Ketua Pembina Yayasan CSIS, Bapak Yusuf Wanandi, Wakil Ketua Pembina Yayasan CSIS, Bapak Dr. Hasan Wirayuda, oh maaf Pak, pangling saya Pak, anggota Pembina Yayasan CSIS, Bapak Profesor Jisman Simanjuntak, Ketua Pengurus Yayasan CSIS, Ibu Clara Yuwono, Wakil Ketua Pengurus Yayasan CSIS, Ibu Dr. Mari LK Pangestu, anggota Pembina Yayasan CSIS, Ibu Ria Murdani, anggota pengawas Yayasan CSIS, Bapak Dr. Rizal Sukma, Bapak Dr. Yose Rizal Damuri, Executive Director CSIS. Ibu Dr. Medlina Henditio, Wakil Direktur Eksekutif Bidang Operasional CSIS, Ibu Dr. Syafiah Muhibat, Wakil Direktur Eksekutif Bidang Studi CSIS, Bapak Dr. Philips Vermonte, Senior Fellow CSIS, yang hadir mendampingi saya hari ini, Letnan Jenderal TNI Purnawirawan Safri Samsudin, Ibu Metia Hafid, Ketua Komisi 1 DPR RI dan Wakil Ketua Tim Kampanye Nasional saya, Letnan Jenderal TNI Purnawirawan Hotman Mangaraja Panjaitan, mantan Duta Besar kita di Perancis, Laksamana Madya TNI Purnawirawan Didit Ashraf, mantan Wakil Kepala Staf Angkatan Laut dan Wakil Gubernur Lemhanas, dan seluruh duta besar negara-negara sahabat yang hadir di sini. Karena begitu banyak perwakilan dari negara asing, ada 80, dalam rangka menghormati para tamu, as a courtesy, I would like to give my talk in English. First of all, I would like to thank the CSIS for the great honor given to me. I'm being invited here at this very illustrious and very famous and very important institution. The history of CSIS, I think, can be considered as really a part of the recent history of Indonesia for the last 5 decades. Therefore, it's a great honor for me. And today I've been asked to talk about the direction and the strategy of our foreign policy. If in the event that I get the mandate from my people and I will form the next government, I think it could be of interest to see the direction and the strategy of the foreign policy that I will pursue. However, basically, I think all observers of Indonesia will realize that the tradition of Indonesia's foreign policy has been very, very clear. From the early days of our independence and our sovereignty, we have opted for an independent foreign policy guided by the principles of non-membership of any geopolitical bloc. Our tradition in foreign policy has always been non-aligned. We do not wish to be part of any geopolitical bloc. And this tradition, I think I am committed to continue and to pursue, because it is not only in our tradition, it is the wish of the majority of the Indonesian people, and more importantly, it's in our national interest. Indonesia, because of our history, because of our geographical position, we are basically in the middle of great civilizations. We are at the crossroad of great civilizations. We have been the crossroads for many, many centuries. Even now, we are in the middle of very important trading routes, strategic waterways. We are I think maybe the second or the third longest coastline in the world. We depend on trade. We have always depended on trade from our early existence as independent sultanates, principalities, etc. We live on trade. We are dependent on trade. So therefore, it has become our perceived interest to have this tradition, what I call the good neighbor policy. We want to maintain a policy of good neighborliness in our region and also in the world. Number one, this is in our strategic interest, what I call even our defense outlook will be based on this premise. A web of strong friendship. This web of strong friendship will actually be our strongest pillar of foreign policy and, in the end, also our defense policy. Why? Because of the common denominator that every country in the world faces, especially in Southeast Asia. We need peace and stability for our economy to flourish. And we need our economy to flourish to bring prosperity to our people. That, in the final analysis, is the duty of any government. We must eradicate poverty. A regime, a government, a national leadership that cannot take care of its own people does not have any right to comment on the policies of other countries. We must take care of our own household first. We must take care of our people. For this, for our economy to flourish, we need peace and stability. We need good relations with all countries. We need this relationship web that will invite foreign investment, that will open markets for us, that will create jobs for our people, and in the final analysis, to eradicate poverty. Basically, that is my speech. Short and sweet, I think, right? I think this is the shortest speech I have made this year, you know? Because the tendency is for any politician, you know, once they get a microphone in front of them, they don't want to let go. But I realize so many distinguished ambassadors and so many distinguished leaders here, so I think I'll keep it short and to the point. This is our policy. This is our tradition. This is our conviction. We will not be part, as long, if I get the mandate, I will maintain this tradition. We will not join any bloc. We will not be part of any military alliance that is against our tradition. And in my conviction, it is against our national interest. We respect all the great powers in the world. The West has contributed great contributions to humanity. The East also. China has been a great civilization for thousands of years. Basically, it is the oldest human civilization in recorded history. India also. All the other powers, Russia, we respect. Russia has been a good friend of Indonesia. Africa, we suffered the same fate. We were under colonialism and imperialism for many, many years. We know what it means to live under oppression. Our parents, our grandparents imprisoned, our ancestors thrown away to many parts of the world. We know how demeaning it is to be considered second, third, fourth class. I, as a young man, I myself saw the signs outside swimming pools in Jakarta. It was in the wall, yeah, dipahat di marmer. It was, what do you call it, engraved in the marble, you know, and it said, Verboden voor honden en inlander. I saw with my own eyes. In 1978, there was still this, you know, it was closed by moss. When I opened it, I saw this. So I would like to say that we identify with the peoples under occupation, striving for their independence everywhere. Because we felt it. I went to school in Singapore and Hong Kong when Singapore and Hong Kong were still British colony. There were certain parts that I, being a brown man, could not go in. So I experienced as a young boy. Therefore, we identify with the peoples that are striving for their independence today. However, that is the beauty of the Indonesian people and culture. We don't hold grudges. We have no enmity. We are now friends with the Dutch. We are friends with everybody now. I think that is the uniqueness of, maybe could be said, the uniqueness of Indonesia, that Indonesians basically forget easily. So basically, that concludes my talk. Therefore, this should not be pidato. Yeah? Pidato itu panjang. Ini, let us say, a small talk. And better I conclude my remarks and I open myself for questions from the floor, if there are any. If there are no questions, all the better. But anyway, if you have a question, please give easy questions, not so difficult. Thank you very much. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih, Bapak Prabowo. Now you give me a hard job to do because we are allotted not half an hour, so I have to fill in. Thank you for, I think, a very short but deep speech on the future of Indonesia's foreign policy under a Prabowo administration. If I may, before we open the Q&A, I'm going to use my power. Probably this is my only time to have power over you, Pak. A question related to what you've been said. Being a non-aligned country, somehow we do need a clear policy towards big powers. What would be your initial thought on Indonesia's China policy or Indonesia's US policy? If I may request your insight on this.
Well, as I explained, we respect the United States. Let us be very clear, the United States has helped Indonesia in the critical moments of Indonesian history. This we must acknowledge. In our war of independence, the United States basically sided with Indonesia. That is a part of history. The United States put strong pressure on the Dutch to negotiate and to hand over sovereignty. That is part of history. So no doubt about it that we cannot forget this debt of honor to the United States of America. In critical time, they sided with us. Also, I would like to say, Australia sided with us in our war of independence. This is a fact of history. In fact, when there was a United Nations mediation effort, and there was a committee of good officers, if I'm not mistaken, that was the committee of good officers. The Netherlands chose Belgium, right? That's a no-brainer, right? But Indonesia chose Australia, and the United States was chosen by the United Nations. That shows the depth of our relationship. And we don't forget our friends in difficult times. However, we also recognize China's importance in Southeast Asia and also for Indonesia now. As I said, China is a great civilization. It has contributed a lot, and now it is very, 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 very active and contributing a lot to our economy. Russia, we also cannot forget. Russia helped Indonesia also in difficult times. Yes, at that time it was called the Soviet Union, but if you see Jakarta now, if you see our capital city, many of the great public works built by, at that time, Soviet Union, by Russian and by, let us say, Eastern Bloc countries. So this is, if you ask me, we have to give due respect to these great powers. Yeah. We also have to respect and have the best of relations with India, with the Islamic countries, of course. We are majority Muslim, with Japan. So basically, Indonesia's, my philosophy is 1,000 friends too few, one enemy too many. This is easier said than done. It is easy to say, but it's not easy to carry out. But this is, I'm convinced, even now, this is my philosophy in my my domestic politics, as you may have observed, right? I'm friends with everybody. Even if they don't want to be friends with me, I still want to be friends with them, right? Huh? I learned this the hard way, through a long process, When you are young, sometimes you are a bit, you are a bit unwise. As time goes on, and so I'm convinced this is, and actually, I regret that I learned this teaching a bit late in my life. Had I learned it maybe in my 30s and 40s, maybe, I don't know. my biography would be a bit different. Yeah. But it's okay. Yeah, better late than never. You know, so, Pa Phillips, that is my philosophy, right? I mean, I'm sorry if somebody wants to get us here and get us there. I said, no, we are friends with all. And maybe as friends to many sides, we can be of assistance. We can be some sort of bridge. We can be some sort of, when we needed them, they helped us. Maybe now we should give a payback. We should help those who once helped us. So I think that is my position regarding relations with the great powers.
Thank you, Pak Prabowo. I still have 15 minutes of your time, so I have one or two more questions before I open the floor. Something sounded like music to my ears when you were saying that basically foreign policy begins at home, that poverty alleviation should be very important, and then all domestic stabilities and so on. And we know that China has been praised by many reports that successive Chinese governments since 1970s have been able to lift more than 700 million people out of poverty. Would you emulate the way the Chinese governments are doing in terms of poverty alleviation?
Is this a trick question? I want to make something very clear. Yeah? I do admire and acknowledge the success of the Chinese leaders in nearly eradicating poverty. I think we have to. Anybody with any fairness in the rationality, etc., must acknowledge that the Chinese leaders has achieved something very rare in human history, to lift 700 million people out of poverty in one generation, in 40 years. That is a real achievement. So in my opinion, you know, each country, each civilization has its own culture, has its own way of doing things. If a government in one country succeeded in mitigating or even eradicating poverty, I think it behooves us to try to learn how they did it. But it does not mean that we can copy their methods. Maybe their methods is not in tune with our culture. So we have to adjust. At the same time, you know, many of our people, especially the educated elite, you know, for the last 50 years, maybe 60 years, we have been always looking to the West. I think it's normal. We were colonized by the West, so a lot of our experience, our thinking, we like to emulate the West, because the West, no doubt, has succeeded in many, many fields. Industrial Revolution, Reformation, the Renaissance, development of democracy. We must acknowledge the great strides of the West. But on the other hand, we cannot copy what works for the West. We cannot bring to Indonesia and try to, or bring anywhere in the world and try to carry it out, especially in the West. So there are nuances. So I think there must be a rebalancing, and now we have to learn from other countries, from the East, the Japanese experience, the Korean experience, the Chinese experience, the Indian experience. So this is my position, that we admire what the Chinese has done, tremendous achievement. I mean, and I think many of the Chinese leaders are true to their principles and true to their conviction. They understand that they have to serve the people. So I think this is the message that, not that we can copy, we can emulate everything they have done. No, we have our way of doing things. They have their way of doing things. Yeah, we can emulate. Maybe their commitment against corruption, their focus on education, their strong discipline, their strong national pride. You know, this we admire. You know, if you go to a Chinese high school, you will find out they spend many hours in the school. They go home maybe 9 o'clock at night. So this type of dedication, this type of commitment, it's something that it behooves us to study and to try to adopt some of the best practices. Thank you.
Thank you. Please give a round of applause to Pak Prabowo's response to the two questions. Now, I think I'm going to ask our former foreign minister, Pak Hasan Wirayuda, the honor to ask a question. Silakan Pak Hasan.
Terima kasih moderator Pak Vermonte, Pak Prabowo yang saya hormati. Pertama penghargaan dan terima kasih saya atas pidato tentang arah dan strategi politik luar negeri Indonesia. Tadi digarisbawahi bahwa prinsip number one adalah good neighbor policy. Pasti menurut tangkapan saya tidak hanya neighbors yang punya direct border dengan Indonesia. Karena yang dimaksud juga bisa jadi dalam artian kawasan. Kawasan terbatas adalah Southeast Asia, Asia Tenggara, tapi juga Asia Timur. Asia Timur itu dalam pengertian baru itu mencakup 16 negara. 10 negara ASEAN, China, Japan, and Korea, as well as India, Australia, and New Zealand. Dengan terjadinya pergeseran, with the geopolitical shift from transatlantic to East Asia now the region of the 21st century. We are in the very center of the world now. We are no longer in the periphery like during 40 years of Cold War. Of course, being the center of the world and the intensive cooperation that we have been developing, in particular on economic cooperations, the century of Asia offers many good opportunities. Intra-ASEAN trade, rather intra-East Asian trade, intra-East Asian investment has been always on the rising since, say, year 2000. Prabowo underlines the importance of trade to many countries. Last year, our bilateral trade with China reached 169 billion US dollar. Not to mention with Singapore, with Malaysia, with Japan, Korea, and others. So, but this Asian century also offers potential conflicts. The existing conflicts might develop into an open conflicts, in particular between the two superpowers. The problem is that not only that they are, United States sees China as their strategic competitor, meaning competition in many different areas, not just trade war like what President Trump used to claim, but in many different areas. And the problem between the two is that there's been a lack of direct communications and dialogues. Of course, we appreciate that President Xi Jinping will be meeting with President Biden and Foreign Minister of China visited Washington, met with his counterpart. But still, the danger of no direct communication and dialogue, as Henry Kissinger, Dr. Kissinger said, that there is great potential of tensions, local conflicts could develop into an open conflicts. So I wish that Pak Prabowo would elaborate how do you see this development in our regions and how you develop your policy, foreign policy with regard to our kawasan regions of Asia and now also popularly called as Indo-Pacific. Thank you, Pak Prabowo.
Tadi Bapak berdiri, jadi saya juga berdiri untuk jawabnya. Yes, the competition, the rivalry between two great powers is a matter of concern for us, and these rivalries has been occurring during the long history of mankind. There will always be one power who will feel threatened by the rise of a new great power, and this is the history of mankind. And sad to say that in the history of mankind, a lot of these competitions ended in open war. So this is something that is of concern to us. I think there was some good research made by a historian, I think, Graham Allison, if I'm not mistaken, he made some sort of study of the great rivalries, a strong power that has been, let us say, predominant, will always feel threatened by a new rising power. The situation now is a bit different. Our world is getting smaller, and any conflict can very fast, any open conflict between the great powers can very fast turn into nuclear war. And in nuclear war, I think the destruction and the suffering will be on a scale that we have never seen before, and that is considered mutual assured destruction. So I am an optimist. I believe that the leaders of these great superpowers are cognizant of their duty to their people and to humanity. I think that in the end, these leaders will rise to the occasion, and I think we are seeing steps towards that event. We see the Australian Prime Minister meeting the Chinese leaders. We see the American President will be meeting the President of the PRC. So these steps are really showing us that they realize the great risk that can erupt if this competition is not calibrated. So I'm a bit optimistic. I think because any open conflict will result in all sides suffering. And as a former military man, you know, when we have these simulations and let us say war games, we can calculate. And if the advantage is not commensurate with the loss, I think a rational leader will want to avoid open warfare. And I think this is the way of the world now. So I am hopeful that with these meetings and the competition will be there, and why not? Competition is good, but competition should not deteriorate into a zero-sum game. So, Pak Hasan Wirajuda, I think I'm a bit more optimistic now, I think. And I think my instincts have shown to be a bit correct in many parts of the world, that we, the people of the world, would like collaboration, not conflict. And I think this is the trend of the world. We are so small now, the planet is getting smaller. We have problems with climate change. You know, for us in this part of the world, climate change is not something theoretical. Many of our people are losing their land, losing their homes because of the rising sea. And any government of Indonesia must address this clear and present danger of the environment, of climate. We have so many problems facing us. And so therefore, I think our stand is, our direction is very clear and very, very appropriate. 1,000 friends too few, one enemy too many, collaboration, cooperation, good neighbor, and let us seek prosperity for all. Let us maintain peace. I was a former soldier. I know what fighting means. The innocent will always suffer. For some, collateral damage is what do you call it? Is a term. I have seen collateral damage. The innocent will suffer. And therefore, I'm even more convinced that we must do all our utmost to avoid any inclination to solve political problems through military means. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Prabowo. Now, we are in the election mood, so I see those on the right-hand side have more in numbers, so I start with those who are on the right-hand side. if there is any questions from the right-hand side of us. Anyone? Yes, I see His Excellency, Ambassador of Japan. Excellency, please.
My name is Kanasugi Kenji, Ambassador of Japan. Thank you very much, Mr. Prabowo, for your very concise opening statement. My question is economic diplomacy. People say that the global free trade is in danger, and free trade has supported global growth for half a century or more. Of course, strategic rivalries between the United States and China is one thing, but at the same time, on the Indonesian front, Indonesia's export restrictions on raw materials such as nickel has been a contentious issue in the WTO for quite some time. And also Indonesia's import restrictions and sometimes excessive local content requirement is getting a hindrance to trade and investment between Indonesia and its trading partners. So once elected, how are you going to resuscitate global free trade, and also how you address Indonesia's trade and investment policy? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ambassador, please, Pak Prabowo.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Yes, in principle, we need to maintain free trade in principle. But there's another principle that's very important for us, and that's the principle of equal playing field, the principle of fairness. So, regarding raw materials, we feel that it's our right, the right of our people, to want to be as advanced as you, as Japan. We want to be an industrial country. We want to produce sophisticated goods. We are open for trade, but we feel that, we want our people also not to have always minimum wage. A lot of our people live on less than $2 a day. Some maybe less than $1 a day. A lot of our people cannot get jobs. Many of our children are malnourished. We have stunting. A 10-year-old boy, the physical height, the physical size is that of a 4-year-old. This cannot be. So we have to be producing industrial goods. This is our right. And so we are forced to want to process our natural resources in Indonesia. And we welcome foreign investment. We welcome all countries, all companies, if they want to come, but we want the factories in Indonesia. Our boys and girls need jobs. What's the alternative? Your Excellency. So, yes, free trade, but we need a fair playing field. We need equal opportunity, and we need jobs, and we don't want to always be the majority of people or the bulk of our people live subsistence, live on less than $1 a day. That is not the purpose of Indonesia getting its independence. We don't want to be a nation of coolies. I repeat, we do not want to be a nation of coolies. Do you know there's 70-year-olds still riding the beca. Do you know that? The beca? The trishaw, 70 years old. This is not human rights. As president, I will do my best so that there will be no more 70-year-olds, 60-year-olds driving the beca. That is inhuman. And therefore we need to industrialize. We need factories. We need to create jobs of dignity. We don't want always to be subsistence peasants. That is my goal, and I respect all countries. We open ourselves for investment. But yeah, that is now the new requirement of the Indonesian people. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak. Now I think we're going to collect 2 questions at all times, so then we can have more questions. Now we go to the middle first, and then I'll come back to the right-hand side. Ambassador Penny from Australia, and Excellency.
Good afternoon, Pak Prabowo, and thank you for your, it's not a speech, but thank you for setting out your clear approach to Indonesia's foreign policy. I want to ask about Indonesia's leadership in the region. And where are the areas, the issues in our region where you consider that Indonesia should be exercised, the issues of foreign policy, where you think Indonesia should be exercising its leadership or exercising its agency? So you talked about free and active. What's the active part?
Thank you, Ambassador Penny. Excellency.
My name is Benedetto Latteri. I'm the Italian ambassador. Thank you for your introduction, Mr. Minister. My question is more or less the same like the Australian colleague. Which is your attitude towards European Union?
Thank you, Ambassador Penny. Thank you very much. Leadership. You know, I believe leadership is by example. So Indonesia, if we want to really be considered a leader in the region, we must show that we could get our act in order, that we can take care of our people. If we cannot take care of our people, how can we claim a position of leadership? So therefore, my priority is to mitigate, or even we have to be daring, we have to eradicate poverty. I think I'm very lucky because if I were to receive the mandate next year, I will be continuing 10 years of, I would say, successful economic management by President Joko Widodo and his administration. The parameters, the figures are very, very clear on many, many sectors. Number of the number of kilometers of highways built, the number of dams built, the number of airports built, the number of ports built, the number of roads built, the recipients of a lot of government assistance. We have become basically a welfare state. We are taking care of our poor and our weak. Are we satisfied? No. Do we have to do better? Yes. Is there corruption? Yes. Is there leakage? Yes. We must address that. Our education system has to be improved. Yes. And so that's my answer. And when you ask what's the active part, we will always be active in pushing for promoting dialogue, peace, negotiation. We always will be consistent. We always will try to push for compromise in all matters. That's our active part. And I repeat again, my conviction, if we are successful in getting rid of poverty in Indonesia, we are successful in promoting an economic model that shows there can be progress, there can be growth, but there is social justice. There is equal opportunity for everybody. That, I think, we will attain a position of leadership. Even now, we are surprised. Many African countries now look Indonesia as another alternative. I've gotten requests from counterparts in Africa. They want to send their officers, their cadets, their soldiers to be trained in Indonesia. They want to buy our equipment, etc., etc. They see another alternative. They see another rising example. And they see that we have the same experience as them. We have our share. We had our share. We were colonized for many years. We have our share of insurrections. We have our share of civil wars, of separatists. They are experiencing that now. But we can overcome by negotiation, by collaboration, by compromise. So sometimes it's very funny that we have solved many of our problems by negotiation, by compromise. So that's my answer to Ambassador Penny and to the Italian ambassador. What is my view about the European Union? Excellency, I want to tell you something. Most of the Indonesian elite leaders have been educated in the West. If you see the present cabinet, you can see many of our leaders have been educated in the West. Military leaders, civilian leaders, economic leaders, business leaders, political leaders of every, let us say, of every spectrum in the political field. We have Islamic leaders that went to school in Chicago, right? We have business leaders. They all went to Western. So there is a sympathy, there is an affinity, there is an admiration for the European Union. I used to joke to my friends and colleagues, you know, the problem is not with us. The problem is with you. With the European Union. You know what I would say? We love the European Union. We love Europe. The problem is Europe doesn't love us. You know? Europe doesn't even know Indonesia. They only know Bali. You know? So that's it. We admire you. We admire the Renaissance. Yeah? If you ask a 5-year-old Indonesian, you know, where do you want to go? They always say, I want to go to. You know, the first choice of many 5-year-old Indonesians, you know, to be very frank, the first choice, of course, I want to go to America. That's what. There is this goodwill, you know. But what I'm afraid, this is what I'm afraid, as a friend. You know, I grew up in Europe. Maybe I know European history maybe better than many Europeans. Maybe. But what I'm saying is this. What I'm afraid of is that Europe will lose your moral leadership. Because, let me be very frank to you, you know the talk between the South leaders, the talk between us, they say the West has double standards. The West teaches us democracy. The West teaches us human rights. But the West has different standards. And you know, this will be very critical. I'm saying this as a friend. I'm afraid the West will lose your moral leadership. Because the last 100 years, we all are in awe. The last 200, 300 years, we are in awe with your strive, with your achievements. And also, yes, your philosophies. Justice, equality before the law, human rights. We admire that. And we emulate. We try to emulate, right? CSIS, one of the strongest pro-Western institution in Indonesia. Am I correct? Pak Yusuf? Yeah? Right? I want to be very frank. Right? Yeah. When I was in the army, they always criticize me, you know that? Right? I'm sorry, I'm not a real politician, you know that? That's why I talk like this, right? We admire you. Seriously. But that's why I say, you know, we love Europe, but Europeans maybe don't love us. You know? So, and then I'm as a friend, I'm saying that please be careful. You will be still strong, you will be still wealthy, but as Hassan Wiraju said, there's a shift in the world. There's a shift in the world. There's a shift. Now, we don't really need Europe anymore. To be very frank. Right? We love Europe. But if Europe doesn't love us, if there's double standard, you know, now is the age of, what do you call it? TikTok, we see everything, CNN, everything. And, you know, people see what's happening. The West has one standard for this, another standard for that. I will not go into details, you know, because 1,000 friends to few, one enemy to many. So,
Thank you, Pak Prabowo. Pak Prabowo has been very frank as a friend to European Union. And I think if CSIS criticize you, we criticize you as a friend, Pak. Okay. Okay, I go to the left. Too many hands up. I haven't heard from a female participant, so you, yeah. And then the gentleman in the front. I'll come back. We have plenty of time, and I heard Pak Prabowo would like to extend this discussion until tomorrow morning, right? No? All right, Mbak Ivia, please. Please identify yourself so Pak Prabowo would know.
Thank you, Pak Phillips. Good afternoon, Pak Prabowo, Yulia Jarot Supatmo, RTV. Question is simple. We talked about it while we were listening. Yulia Supatmo. My colleague and I whispered about it while you were presenting your talk. So this is a bit of a follow-up question to Ambassador Penny. But basically, our question is, so for the past few months, the past year, Indonesian voters have heard that you will continue a lot of President Jokowi's policies. So our question is, does this also apply in terms of foreign policy? And you already mentioned in your short talk that mostly yes. However, maybe we would like a more elaboration. Will you also approach diplomacy the same way that President Jokowi did, in terms of more focus on trade, as opposed to maybe a more assertive role for Indonesia in non-trade and economic issues? You already touched on Indonesia's role in your presidency as a regional power. You will focus first on domestic affairs. However, there are a lot of regional conflicts or issues that may require a stronger leadership role, perhaps from Indonesia, particularly as a member of ASEAN. So maybe we'd like to hear, in your administration, what will that look like? Thank you.
Thank you. Gentleman in the front.
Okay. I'd like to ask a question about how next year's U.S. presidential elections might impact the U.S.-Indonesian relationship. As you know, when Joe Biden won in 2020, there was a collective sigh of relief throughout the region. And then came Donald Trump, right? Back in the polls now. Who could win in next year's elections? So my question is, can you work with Donald Trump?
Thank you, Pak. So, please, Pak Prabowo.
can I answer Mr. Van Zorge first? Because that's very easy. Right? I am ready to work with anybody that is lawfully elected by the American people. Right? We have to respect the will of the people. Now I go to your question, Ibu Julia. Yeah? So, yes, I will continue the path of Pak Jokowi. I think he has been consistent. He has been very measured and very moderate in all his dealings. Of course, he has to defend Indonesia's national interest. But I think he maintains the best of relationship with China. He also maintains the best relationship with the US and Europe. Although we have problems sometimes with the European Union. Yeah. We are open. We open our market to you for your Mercedes, for your Volkswagen, for your Airbus, for all your products. But you won't allow us to sell palm oil. And now we have problems trying to sell coffee, tea, cocoa. You know, this is what I said about level playing field. and I think sometimes there's a bit of unfairness being, Indonesia, I think, we realize that sometimes we have been too nice. Too nice. Yeah. So it's not like we are being overly nationalistic. No. We want equal treatment. We want fairness, right? By the way, it was the Europeans who at one time forced us to plant tea, coffee, and chocolate. So if now, please pass on to your European people and European leaders that it was the Europeans who came to our islands and forced us to plant tea, coffee, rubber, cocoa. And now you're saying we are destroying our forest. You destroyed our forest before. I'm sorry. Yeah, Ibu Julia. So I will continue. I will continue dialogue. I will continue collaboration. I don't want protectionism, but I want equal playing field. Saya kira itu, Ibu Julia. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Pak Prabowo. Before I go back to the right-hand side, I'd like to ask Ibu Mari Pangestu to ask a question.
Thank you, terima kasih Pak Prabowo atas penjelasannya tadi. Sudah banyak yang disampaikan. Mungkin ini sekedar follow up question. You said that we are not non-aligned. We also want to be friends with everybody. But unfortunately, we're also facing the reality of the US-China geoeconomics and geopolitical competition. So that's the reality. So how do we, what's our policy on navigating when these two elephants are fighting? Because we don't want to be trampled in the war between the two. And we are already being trampled. You mentioned about trade and investment. You know, it is affecting the trade and investment. It is affecting openness of markets. You mentioned that in your speech. And it is affecting the way we see things now, because now it's no longer just about politics, security, economics. It's the interrelationship between the nexus between politics, security, economics, and even technology. So how do you see Indonesia navigating this so that we can continue to develop, we can continue to grow? And you mentioned the bridge, so maybe a little bit follow up from Ibu Penny's question. What should Indonesia do to be a bridge? Since we are friends with everybody, how do we be a bridge? How do we use Southeast Asia? How do we use ASEAN? How do we become heard, either as Indonesia as a middle power or Indonesia with ASEAN and East Asia, whether economically or I think it has to be together, yeah, what we call a comprehensive security approach, which is really combining the economic issue, the security issue, as well as the technology issue. This is now all interrelated. As you know, economic instruments are being used for security purposes. And we want level playing field, as you said. So how do you think ASEAN can play a role and East Asia more widely?
Terima kasih, Ibu Mari Pangestu. Once again, I would like to emphasize and to reiterate that we must remain in our traditional stance. Non-aligned, non-bloc, non-member of any military alliance. Basically, we must maintain neutrality. We respect all the powers. We want to maintain the good relations between all powers. And this, in the history of international politics, to choose to be neutral is always difficult. But the tradition of many countries is to choose neutrality. I would give the example, for instance, of Switzerland, of Sweden at one time, until recently, of Austria until today, of Finland until a few months ago. But to see, at the height of the Cold War, Sweden, Finland, Austria, Switzerland did not join any of the blocs. And basically, there was peace. So, it is my conviction that Indonesia must maintain the best relations between all the great powers. And by having these relations, we can be some sort of honest broker, some sort of bridge, by the fact that we have no hidden agenda. We don't want to harm anybody by joining this, by joining that. But there's always a risk, because you know the easy way is to join a military bloc. There's somebody to defend you. For a small country, for a weak country, it is normal to look for a patron, to look for a strong umbrella. To be neutral, you're on your own. But the essence of neutrality is we cannot and we do not threaten anybody. We have no aspiration outside of Indonesia. Our main concern is the welfare of 280 million people, 5 million boys and girls, 5 million mouths every year coming to Indonesia. 5 million. This is a tremendous challenge for us. We cannot afford to go into any, in my opinion, policies that do not have the first priority is the welfare of our people. Saya kira itu, Ibu Pangestu. Yeah.
Thank you, Ibu Mari. I'll ask around the lady in the front and the gentleman at the back. It's that, I think it's Andrew at the back.
Good afternoon, Excellency Prabowo. That's my honor to see you here. I just wanted to know about the balance between your domestic policies and your international policies. Do you believe in equality of these two policies or not? And with all respect, I have another question. Could I ask?
Choose one.
Just one.
Oh, please, okay, Pak Prabowo said so.
Would you please tell us about your policies toward West Asia, especially toward Palestine issue? During 1 month ago, all of us saw your country's strong stances toward Palestine issue. Would you please tell us about your policy toward Palestine? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So you asked about the balance between my domestic policy and my international policy. I think this is interrelated. As I said, the more successful that we can improve the life of our people, to get rid of poverty, improve the quality of life of our people, the more stature, the more we will be respected internationally. So that is the relationship. In the meantime, we are still active. We participate in the United Nations. We are one of the strongest contributors for peacekeeping. I think we are top 5 or top 8 in the world to contribute peacekeeping operations. We are active in the Organization of the Islamic Countries. We are also active in G20. We are active in many, many international forums. So we will be active. We will do our best to contribute, whatever we can to contribute. About Palestine, I think Indonesia's policy is very, very clear. From the earliest days, all Indonesian governments support the struggle of the Palestinian people to have their own state, to have their independence. That is, I will continue this policy because that is the policy that is demanded and that is required by our people. We, as I said, we have been colonized. We understand being colonized. So we will do our best to support the Palestinian people. I've offered to send a hospital ship. I've also offered to receive victims of the fighting, the bombings in Gaza. We will have contacts with all the governments involved. And if the governments involved allow, I talked to my president. He has agreed that we can receive as many victims as needed to come to Indonesia in our hospitals. We have 110 military hospitals. All these hospitals will be open and at the disposal of the victims of the fighting in Gaza. So our policy has not changed and will not change. We support an independent Palestine based on United Nations resolutions, and I think that's the only way for a real solution to the problems of Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Prabowo. Last one, if I may. Last one from the... Yes, please be concise.
Thank you, Pak Phillips. Thank you, Pak Prabowo. My name is Andrew, researcher from Csis, Department of International Relations. I really respect your policy on international friendship, and probably this is a question as a researcher. Sometimes you just want to go down into the assumptions, and I also am convinced by your assumptions that there would be some mutual assured destruction, which prompt many leaders to think rational. In that particular assumptions, how do you think and how do you view the biggest two examples of open conflict now in the world, which is Gaza and Ukraine, and how does the way you view Gaza and Ukraine will translate into a lesson learned for our own regional flashpoints, which is South China Sea, which is already in your vision and mission document, and also another potential open conflict, which is Taiwan Strait, cross relations between China and Taiwan, and also the continuing the nuclear development by North Korea. Thank you.
Yes, I mentioned several times, I think, that you mentioned the conflict in Ukraine and Gaza. As you know, Indonesia has tried to do our part, contributing to efforts to achieve some sort of peace in Ukraine. Our president went to Kiev, and our president also went to Moscow. I also in the Shangri-La dialogue, I think was last year, I also put forward proposals for a ceasefire, negotiated settlement, United Nations involvement. So that is our contribution. In the Gaza problem. You see our president attended the summit in Riyadh, and our position is very clear. We, as I said, we urge immediately ceasefire, and we are of the opinion that there must be a political solution that will really solve the problem, and the political solution must end in a independent, viable state of Palestine. And lessons learned, I think that everybody knows, especially the leaders of these great superpowers, as I said, will know the risk of massive losses on all sides if there is open conflict. And I personally believe that rationality and self-interest will prevail. I think that is, again, my position. Indonesia, I'm convinced, is in the correct stance. I will continue the path not only of Pak Jokowi, but of all the presidents before, that we will maintain our independent foreign policy. We will not be part of any military bloc. We will not be part of any geopolitical bloc. We need to have the best relations with all partners, all countries, especially our neighbors. Neighbors, regional neighbors, and direct neighbors. Saya kira itu jawaban saya. Terima kasih Pak hadir di sini, Pak Harichan. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Pak. I think we've come to kind of the end of the time, because Pak Prabowo, I think, must be very, very busy. Please give Pak Prabowo rounds of applause. Now, before we close, this is a friendly question. Your video dancing went viral. In your free time, what type of music do you listen to?
Basically, you know, I like all type of music. I like all type of music.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Please give Pak Prabowo again one round of applause. Thank you very much for your participation and questions. I think we've heard sharp, concise framework of what would a Prabowo Subianto foreign policy would look like if Pak Prabowo get elected in the election 2024. I return now the microphone to MC. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bapak Prabowo Subianto and also Bapak Philips Vermonte. And we kindly request for Bapak Prabowo Subianto and Bapak Philips to remain on stage, and we would like to invite all the CSIS leader to take a picture together with Bapak Prabowo and also Bapak Philips as our moderator. Please. Di bawah saja, di bawah saja. Ya. Di bawah, cek ke bawah.